Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, September the 1st, 2021. We're all the same underneath the skin, are we not? Well, this is something that I was told since I was a little boy, and it's become a universal belief. But now, apparently, it's not exactly true. Not when it comes to medicine, at any rate. Alex Berenson wrote on his Substack 8 hours ago, bonus vaccines. If 2 shots are good, 3 must be better. Bigger piece, a fascinating Q&A with firefighters reluctant to be vaccinated, coming soon. But I wanted to put this out now. It is increasingly clear that whether they realize it or not, people have not signed up for a vaccine, but for a lifetime of mRNA therapeutics, assuming the side effects don't make dosing impossible. This is a screenshot for a patient at a hospital in Maryland. And when we look at the screenshot, we see, yes, overdue for dose number 3. You thought you were fully vaccinated? Did you? You thought because you had 2 jabs that you were fully vaccinated? Not so fast. Berenson says, wondering how someone can be overdue for a 3rd dose when the U.S. does not even have a schedule for the 3rd dose and it has not even been authorized for most people? Yeah, me too. Meanwhile, Israel is now making it explicit that its citizens will not be considered vaccinated for more than 6 months after the 2nd dose. Yee. I don't know, that's pretty scary. What does the CBC have to say about this? This is from Mark Gollum today. Israel was down to a handful of daily COVID cases. Now it's around 11,000. What happened? How are you going to work this into the narrative, Mark Gollum? Come on. I'm looking for you to try. I'm sure you do your best. Israel has the highest 7th-day rolling average of new daily coronavirus cases per million people. That doesn't sound good, does it? Just months ago, Israel was a world leader in vaccinating its population and appeared to be putting a stranglehold on the virus that causes COVID-19, wrestling down its daily case count to double digits and at times near 0. Stranglehold, wrestling down. Yes, again, with these metaphors, that COVID-19 is some sort of super sentient beast, which is after us. No, it isn't. It's just a virus, like any other virus. But back to the CBC. But any potential celebration was short-lived as the more contagious Delta variant gained traction and spread quickly to the point where Israel's most recently daily case count was around 11,000. A level not seen since January. Keep in mind that Israel is a country with not very many people in it. According to some Israeli scientists, this reversal of fortune provides lessons for countries like Canada. Is that what they say? When Israel looks at how everything has gone all J.G. Ballard there, after all the jabbing, what would Canada think? No, I don't think they're actually thinking of Canada. According to some Israeli scientists, this reversal of fortune provides lessons for countries like Canada as we enter a 4th wave to remain cautious about letting any guard down to avoid some of the mistakes their country made. Oh, you mean like jabbing everyone repeatedly as fast as they could? Is that the mistake they made? This is a very clear warning sign for the rest of the world, said Dr. Ron Balliser, Chief Innovation Officer at Calit Health Services, in a recent interview with the magazine Science. If it can happen here, it can probably happen anywhere. Yes, that's how viruses work, doctor. When Israel often topped the list of population vaccinated by Oxford University-based Our World in Data, Now it's leading in another category. It has the world's highest 7-day rolling averages of new daily coronavirus cases per million people. On Tuesday, Israel's Ministry of Health reported that the country had set a new daily record for diagnosed coronavirus cases at nearly 11,000, which comes as the Delta variant surges across much of the rest of the world. There were 716 people in country hospitalized in a serious condition with COVID-19 complications, including 159 in ventilators, the Times of Israel reported. You're still using ventilators? Because they kill pretty much every single person you put them on. And while Israel went several weeks in May without a death, more than 550 people have died of COVID-19 in August, including over 100 of them in the last 5 days, the Times of Israel reported. It seems that some mistakes were made when we thought we'd won the war. And now we understand that we only won the battle. The war is still here, and we have to continue and to explain and push all the people to get vaccinated, Israel's coronavirus czar, Professor Salman Zarqa, said in a recent interview with the Times of Israel. Meanwhile, Israeli health officials reported what appeared to be a waning efficacy of the vaccine, including among those who have been double vaccinated. Data showed that of serious cases being admitted to hospital, about 60% of patients were people who had been fully vaccinated, although most were over 60 or with underlying health conditions. Yes, just like the rest of the patients. Many health professional communities, feel that what happened in Israel was a demonstration of population immunity or herd immunity, but the Delta variant, with its higher infectious rate, coupled with waning immunity, has proved this wrong, said Dr. Ayal Leshem, a clinical associate professor in internal medicine and infectious diseases at the Sackler School, seriously, of Medicine in Tel Aviv University in an interview with CBC News. In May, with herd immunity believed to have been established in cases dwindling down to double digits with few deaths, Israel began easing up on its public health restrictions. Businesses and schools were returning to normal. Then, at the beginning of June, capacity limits at stores and restaurants were lifted, as well as for indoor and outdoor gatherings. Israelis no longer needed proof of vaccination to enter various venues. In mid-June, indoor mask requirements were lifted. The government decided that we shouldn't impose restrictions. We will require on vaccines for protection. But then we realized it's very difficult to stop the infections with the Delta variant, said Cyril Cohen, head of the lab of immunotherapy at Bar Ilan University, and a member of the Israeli Health Ministry's Advisory Committee for Clinical Trials on COVID-19 vaccines. What we should have done is to keep some restrictions, for example, wearing of the mask inside. Yes, because that has been proved repeatedly to be absolutely efficacious. So what's the lesson here? Oh, limit gatherings. Yes. Why don't we go all the way to Australia and New Zealand? There's a lesson here, which you smart people out there, and I know all the people who listen to my live stream are quite smart people, you can figure out. And it has to do with the efficacy of the vaccination. But we don't want to talk about that because that would be disconcerting, perhaps. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press today. How's that Pfizer shot working out for you, Israel? The vaccination campaign is proceeding at full speed with more than 100,000 shots administered on most days. So far, more than 2.15 Israelis have received their third shot. Oh, so we need the third. Wow. 2.15 million Israelis. That would be roughly like 30% of the country. I haven't checked the population of Israel recently, but this sounds like about a third of the country. On Sunday, anyone over the age of 12 who has been vaccinated for at least 5 months became eligible for the booster shot. And here are some tweets from disclosed.tv. Just in, Israel, one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, registered close to 11,000 COVID-19 cases on Monday, the health ministry reported today, marking a new record since the start of the pandemic. That's from the Jerusalem Post. And here's another one. Israel now leads the world in 7-day rolling average of new daily COVID-19 cases per capita, overtaking Montenegro and Georgia, according to the Oxford University-based Our World in Data. Oh, and this is a spoof Photoshop from Paul Joseph Watson. CNN, healthy 40-year-old COVID victims' last words, I blame the unvaccinated for this. And of course, the person who is shown is grossly, or as they say medically, morbidly obese. Let's have a look at the chat. Hello to Dan, and Run Pup Casco 88, William Hicks, Metal Mike, who says, when they ask me for my Vax passport, I will reach into my jacket pocket and pull out nothing but my bare hand with my middle finger extended. Bless you. Buddy says, hello, Kevin. I know you alluded to Emerald Robinson's physical appeal. Finally, better late than never, but she's not quite Linda Carter tier. I don't know. Linda Carter has dark hair and pale skin, which is, I guess that's my favorite phenotype. It's an Irish phenotype, but increasingly a rare phenotype in Ireland. What they used to call an Irish Colleen. Emerald Robinson, she has the rare hair and the pale eyes, and that's my second favorite phenotype. Again, a phenotype which is disappearing from the world. Buddy says, what's that about the coming Novavax I hear supposedly safer than all the others? Oscar Toe says, oh, so they have a safer one coming now? Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator, thank you for your service. Says, nice tie. What flags are those? These are all ties of the Revolutionary era in America, from all the different states. And I'm sure well, wait a minute. Gadsden flag. Do you see that? The Gadsden flag here, which apparently is white supremacist, such like. I don't know where I got this tie. I don't know whether I bought it for myself or whether someone gave it to me, but I've had it for, 20, 30 years, something like that. William Hicks says, saw a recent CNN interview with Fauci, who was asked whether a booster should happen at 6 or 8 months. Depends on the data. He replied, what kind of data? He didn't say. But he says, Kevin, are you much of a dancer? No. I don't know, back in the 70s, say, the early 80s, new wave times, I used to go to these places where they would play, new wave music, or before that, actually, there was this place in Vancouver called the Love Affair on Seymour Street, near the bridge, near the Granville Street Bridge. And it had been a gay disco. And I guess Vancouver was surfeited with gay discos in the late 70s. So they decided to try something different. And so it became a new wave disco, Vancouver's first new wave disco. And they used to play, that song? I danced to a Joy Division and recognized the irony. You know that one? Well, it was just like that. And it was funny because this place, the Love Affair, became sort of famous for how many good-looking young women were there. And the word spread out. It spread out to places like Surrey. Such like I was there more than once when a bunch of men from Surrey would come in, and they would ask these cute new wave girls to dance, and they say, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, etc. And so eventually there was a kind of explosion. Oh, so you're a bunch of lesbians, are you? It was very funny to watch. No, they weren't lesbians. They just didn't want to dance with men from Surrey. Oscar Toe says, I think I see the Don't Tread on Me snake. Chad Chesson recognized it as well. Who else do we have here? Hello to Contiki Roulette and to Red Sulfur. Texas Feral Hog. Just go Kevin. Pogo Kevin. No, I never did the Pogo stuff. That was just maybe I tried it once. It just, I woke up the next morning and I couldn't walk. I also never did the spitting stuff because why would anyone do that? It's like close to the most disgusting thing I've ever heard in my life. What about Cornwall? As Jogan 666. Metal Mike says, did you watch Doug Ford today announce that Ontario is becoming East Germany? I didn't watch it. I read the story on CBC. Apparently it's not appealing. It's not, retail is absolved from this, so it's not as bad as Quebec. Kev doing Saturday Night Fever with his flares on, says Kontiki Roulette. I did wear flares. Loon pants, as they used to call them in England, because that's what we wore in the middle 70s with the platform heels. And the platform heels were always really cheap shoes. The heels were made of wood. They wore down really quickly, such that it was agony walking them, literally agony. And of course, because the elephant bells, as they used to call them, your shoes would get caught in them regularly, and not only would it tear the hem of the pants, but you would find yourself stumbling over and over again because your shoes got caught in the pants. Buddy says, summer season is over. Had to sadly part ways with that team as coaches were awful and treated my son badly. Oh, I'm sad to hear that. Fall season started with my new team going better, moving out of his slump. Okay. How persist? Don't dance, but I've been kicked in the head by stage divers a few times. What's your name, Virginia Plain? No, this says Jeffrey Pye. This was several years after that. Roxy Music had already moved on to their disco stage by that time. No, see, I used to dance, okay, but it's not really dancing. Going onto the dance floor and throwing your arms around wildly and your legs around wildly, such that, you know, after 10 minutes, you're just sweating like a horse. I don't know. Maybe I watched this from learning TV or movies, that if you're going to impress women with your dancing, the kind of dancing which involves you being soaking wet and exhausted after 10 or 15 minutes is not going to impress women. True Greenbird says, did you have sideburns and a disco stew? Fro, Kevin, no. Well, no sideburns. I've always hated sideburns. The fro, back in the 70s and the early 80s, I mean, every man had to have long hair, and I can't have long hair because if my hair gets to a, if it got to like Rod Stewart levels, I could barely pull that off. If it got any longer than that, my hair would frizz up and I started to look like Leon Trotsky. And I had round wireframe glasses at the time, so that didn't help. Anran says, Kevin dancing, I can't and don't want to see it. Well, you're lucky that you didn't. Although I wasn't as bad as Elaine Bennis. David Wright says, shh, Kevin, these boomer secrets should die with us. So it appears that the COVID panic hysteria, the vaccine hysteria, is taking in Major League Baseball. And I don't know, do you want Al Leiter and John Smoltz not on your side? Because I remember them well. These guys were solid. They played for a long time. This is from Dylan Gwynn at Breitbart. Excuse me. MLB legends and MLB Network personalities Al Leiter and John Smoltz will no longer appear at MLBN studios after the pair refused to comply with the network's vaccine mandate, the New York Post reports. The vaccination mandate, according to the Post's Andrew Marchant, will take effect on September 1st. Leiter and Smoltz are not banned from appearing on the network, however. Instead, the two will make their appearances remotely, which is exactly what we want to see, people on Zoom screens. And in more sports COVID-19 news, This is from Michael Hurley at CBS Boston. Cam Newton was forced to miss 5 days of work last week, including 3 practices during that time. Rookie quarterback Mac Jones took most of the reps at the most important position on the field. Now Newton is gone and Jones is the team's QB1. Considering those circumstances and considering Bill Belichick has famously stated that dependability is more important than ability, I guess that's why he let go the greatest quarterback in NFL history. Fans and media reacted to the release of Newton on Tuesday by wondering if his status of not being fully vaccinated contributed to the end of his Patriots tenure. Belichick adamantly denied that Newton's or anyone's vaccination status impacted his decisions on roster cutdown day and noted that many positive COVID cases around the NFL have been in players who've been vaccinated. Oh, did they really notice that? Did they really think about that and the consequences of that? No, I don't think so. This is from Craig Bannister of CNS News. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, is inviting journalists who have attacked his stance on the value of natural immunity and opposition to COVID mask mandates and vaccine passports to read the results of a new study. Quote, to every snot-nosed journalist, and journalist is in scare quotes, who accosted me in the halls of Congress and spouted Fauciisms denigrating natural immunity, read the science, unquote. Senator Paul tweeted Monday, citing an article titled Harvard Epidemiologist Says the Case for COVID Vaccine Passports Was Just Demolished by the Foundation for Economic Education. You know, I'm of two minds about Senator Rand Paul. On the other hand, I really don't like libertarians, especially since libertarians have simply become all about license. Not about responsibility or duty or just about, getting high and shooting up and, I don't know, all the worst that people are capable of. But on the other hand, I have to admire Rand Paul because he's an old-fashioned libertarian of a type which has pretty much disappeared. I believe in empirical evidence, and this should matter. But, when Rand Paul said that, yes, I've been, cut off from social media, but, private companies should be able to do whatever they like. Rand Paul is so close to being such a valuable person. Here's a piece by Tom Chivers at Unheard, How Not to Talk to a Science Denier. Imagine you bought a book with the title How to Talk to a Contemptible Idiot Who is Kind of Evil. You open the book and read the author earnestly telling you how important it is that you listen and show empathy and acknowledge why the people you're talking to might believe the things they believe. If you want to persuade them, he says, you need to treat them with respect. But all the way through the book, the author continues to refer to the type of people he wants to persuade as contemptible idiots who are kind of evil. At one stage, he even says, when speaking to a contemptible idiot who is kind of evil, don't call them a contemptible idiot who is kind of evil. Most contemptible idiots find that language insulting. But he continues to do it and frequently segues into lengthy digressions about how stupid and harmful the idiot's beliefs are. Presumably, you would not feel that the author had really taken his own advice on board. This is very much how I feel about How to Talk to a Science Denier by the Harvard philosopher Lee McIntyre. McIntyre wants to help us change people's minds, specifically to help us change the minds of those strange, incomprehensible people called science deniers. He addresses 5 main groups of deniers. Flat earthers. Seriously, you're going to throw those in with everyone else? Climate deniers, anti-vaxxers, GMO skeptics, and COVID deniers. Yeah, GMO skeptics. Let's just start fooling around with nature at its most basic level, because nothing could possibly go wrong. Oh, but back centuries ago, people were breeding animals with different animals. Yes, they were. There was this famous Augustinian monk who did that. What he wasn't was altering things at a genetic level. I've always been on the side of science, insofar as it has a use, which is not to explain the universe, because it cannot do that, because that is not its point. But now I come closer and closer to George Bernard's views that scientism is the worst thing in the world, the absolute worst thing in the world, because we're constantly being told things that are obviously not true, and we must believe them, well, because the experts say it. And here's a piece from TGP fact-checking the truth in the media, because the truth matters, by Ben Wetmore. Sidney Page, in an objective news piece, amplifies the opinions of a mother, Wendy, whose extreme opinions lack scientific evidence and logic. Page does her best to make Wendy's opinion seem common, when in reality it's an extreme position in response to a mask policy with which many agree. The author's implicit assumptions and tacit agreement with the view she reports destroys her community. Major violations. Unbalanced opinion is fact. Some people say implicit assumptions in headline. Last week, Tennessee's Hamilton County School District announced that masks will be mandatory for students and staff, with one key caveat. Students whose parents complete an opt-out form will be exempt from the policy. The district was ahead of the curve. On Tuesday, Governor Bill Lee signed an executive order that extended that option to all parents in the state. This is where the news stops and the promotion of activist views begins. The first problem is a headline that implicitly assumes the opt-out policy is unjust. Quote, a school district had an opt-out policy for masks, but not the dress code. One mom fought back, unquote. Yes, dress code versus masks. How you appear to the world versus choking yourself. I can see how they're equivalent. If the mom, Wendy, had to fight back, then the reporter assumes there was something implicitly unjust in the policy. Page tacitly agrees that the dress code is sexist, so she frames the article as such. Feminist mother fights back against misogyny to promote science and female empowerment. Yes. I can't imagine how anyone who would think there was anything wrong with 15-year-old girls just shaking it for all the boys in their class. That could possibly never have any problems. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. We have seen a 25% increase in deaths of people who are fully vaccinated over the last week. Israel? No. This is from Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia. How long do you think that our elite can keep this up, this narrative up? It's all for, oh, no. Forget what we said about the 2 jabs. Now you need 3. Well, now you need 4. Now you need 5. And I searched this today and I couldn't find it. And I apologize. Maybe someone else has found it. But someone joked about a month ago that the vaccines are going to be, like a monthly thing, like Netflix for your arm. This is from Connor Boyd at the Daily Mail. Just 500,000 Britons with severely suppressed immune systems will be invited for a 3rd COVID jab after the government's vaccine advisory panel finally signed off plans for booster doses tonight. Between 400,000 and 500,000 of the most vulnerable patients, including those with leukemia, HIV, and organ transplant patients, will be eligible for the top-up doses when the rollout expands in coming days. Adults age 18 or above will be offered either the Pfizer or Moderna jab, even if they were additionally immunized with AstraZeneca's. Yes, because mix and match. There's been no studies done of mix and match but we're sure there's not going to be a problem with this. I wonder whether many people listening to this live stream remember a time, if you will, when it was assumed that top politicians were not in charge of everything. They were not dictators. They didn't have the power to move heaven and earth. This is from Drew Anderson of the CBC. In Alberta, COVID-19 hospitalizations are up, case counts are up, and anxiety too. No, the CBC has nothing to do with pushing up anxiety. Schools are reopening. Some workplaces are returning. Vaccinations are lagging. Best summer hats, meanwhile, are still for sale on the United Conservative Party website. And there sits an empty podium. Taking a casual stroll through social media in Alberta these days, it's hard to ignore a common question: where is Jason Kenney? Why has the Premier been silent in public since August the 9th, as the Delta-driven fourth wave of the pandemic surged? The absence appears, for all intents and purposes, to be a direct refutation of everything that's known about communications in a crisis. Get out front, be clear, calm people down, empathize, never leave a vacuum. So this crisis has existed since what, February of last year? This isn't the kind of crisis that's like a day-by-day crisis, because it's been going on forever. And in social media terms, it has been going on forever. But does it matter? The CBC asks. Without a guiding voice, oh my God, how did people manage to get through their quotidian existences without some politician saying, do this, don't do that, think this, don't think that? I'm here for you. I'm looking at everything in my God-like way. Businesses and organizations are left to fill a void. Oh my God, filling the void of everyday life without government giving you instructions on everything. How did we live before February 2020? With their own policies and procedures, their own personal decisions, or their own misinformation. There are many questions that have been left unanswered in the absence, including the rationale for lifting almost all COVID-19 restrictions this summer. This is again from the CBC, from Tara Deschamps. COVID-19 created lots of supply chain problems, and they're nowhere close to being solved. Shortage of semiconductors expected to last into 2022 at least. Well, that raises a bunch of interesting questions. You know, when I got back into the media in an unofficial way, when I started this podcast with Kevin Steele years ago, one of the reasons I did it, well, the main reason I did it was I would read stories like this and why aren't you asking the obvious questions? Why is it that we have a shortage of semiconductors expected to last until 2022 at least? Because semiconductors aren't all made in one place. What they are in Taiwan? Seriously? Why would you do that? I mean, the security implications of that are terrifying. No, but it's more efficient that way. Well, it's more efficient until something, like unexpected happens. Well, how often can you expect unexpected things to happen? Quite regularly, actually. And let's get into Canadian totalitarianism. This is from Benjamin Shingler at the CBC. Quebec's vaccine passport goes into effect, limiting much of public life for those unvaccinated. Starting today, proof of vaccination will be as much of a daily necessity in Quebec when leaving the house as a wallet or house keys. You see how this is presented to us? There's nothing unnormal about this at all. Come on, you didn't get your jabs? You didn't expose yourself to experimental mRNA procedures? Well, then you're just as stupid as the guy who forgot his wallet or house keys when he left the house. Dubbed the Corona-19 vaccination passport, digital paper documentation will be required to take part in much of public life, from having a beer to playing badminton. Playing badminton? Is that something that many adults do? I could be wrong about this. Perhaps I haven't been paying attention. This is from Lucas Powers and Adam Carr of the CBC. Ontario residents will soon have to show proof that they've been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. What does that mean? Does that mean 2 jabs or 3 jabs? Or soon 4 or 5? To dine indoors at restaurants and go to gyms and theaters, but not necessarily to enter retail locations, the province announced Wednesday. At a news conference, Premier Doug Ford said the new system came from in-depth conversations with experts based on evidence and best advice. We need to protect our hospitals. Once again, the hospitals are there to protect us. We do not exist to protect hospitals. We need to avoid lockdowns at all costs. Well, how many lockdowns are you responsible for, President Fat Body? We need our kids in schools and our businesses to stay open. The receipts can be printed or downloaded as a PDF file to smartphones. Fully vaccinated here means having had 2 doses with the most recent at least 14 days prior. Neither a recent COVID-19 infection nor a recent negative test will substitute for 2 shots. Yes, we all believe in science, and so we're going to pretend that natural immunity is not as good as unnatural immunity, the kind that disappears after 6 months or keeps going down, but it doesn't matter because experts have told President Fat Body this. Oh, QR codes. Again, there were some people dubbed conspiracy theorists who claimed that when smartphones came out, this was going to be tyranny because you were going to be tracked at all times. Yes, you stupid people. Oh, you mean that the little thing in your phone means you can be tracked and are tracked at all times? And now you're going to have to use your smartphone to prove that you're righteous enough to get a meal in a restaurant? And they laugh at conspiracy theories. This is from David Aiken at Global News. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau said anti-vaccine protesters that have disrupted some of his Ontario campaign events ought to be condemned, and that his chief opponent, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, has not done enough to correct those protesters. Yeah, that's the word he used. It was Trudeau's strongest language yet, since one group of protesters forced the party to cancel an event last Friday in Bolton, Ontario. The Bolton protest was followed by a similar one Sunday morning in Cambridge, Ontario, and each featured loud, foul-mouthed militants that tried to shout down Trudeau. A smaller group of about 30, but just as loud and just as obscene, showed up at an unannounced campaign event here Tuesday afternoon. You know, for decades now, it's about 1990 or so, perhaps even earlier, people considered to be dissidents would attempt, in private locations to have someone speaking and someone listening, and angry people would show up to scream and block access, and the police wouldn't intervene. But those were bad people, so why do we give a toss? But if Trustafarian Justin Trudeau is inconvenienced, well, that is the worst thing in the world. Anran says, Kevin, please say correct like Grady from The Shining from now on. Thanks in advance. I have to check this out again. I'd have to get it right. The late Mr. Hurricane, who is new to me, says paycheck protection, Kevin. Oscar Toe says, yeah, the ICU story is an obvious lie. How would that stop basic operations? LOA. Well, I'll mention something that I mentioned, months ago. That I have a brother who lives in the province of Alberta, Calgary, actually. And he has been very ill with very many different conditions, probably starting from the first condition, for quite some time. When he finally was allowed back into the hospital in Calgary, and I think it was in June of last year, the doctor told him that if it had been one more day, he would have died, because they just stopped doing everything else, because the only real disease is COVID. All the other diseases, such as the diseases that my brother suffers from, are fake. Quachalango says, KMG, don't die without a 4 Monday Kinks profile. The Kinks, huh? Yeah, I'll think about that. I'll think about one of my favorite bands, but I don't know. Did they ever make a really good album after, say, Muswell Hillbillies? I mean, I could go into the reasons why that never happened. Is there a moderator in the house? Asked Metal Mike. Were we having terrible things being said? Popcasco 88 says KMG is fat shaming Doug Ford. I'm done with this stream. Well, I'll say it again. I'll be explicit about this. If Doug Ford, who is clearly terrified of dying from COVID, were really worried about this, in such a way that he could actually do something about it, with the means available to him, he would work to lose 80 or 100 pounds. Okay, who else do we have here? Taiwan's TSMC in South Korea, Samsung control more than 70% of the semiconductor manufacturing market, says Steve. Yes, we wouldn't want that to happen. But, we've been obsessed with efficiency since the 1990s. No, we wouldn't want, people in Texas, used to make chips. But no, that's not efficient. Yeah, but what would happen, if the most efficient place got knocked out for some reason? Well, that will never happen, because unexpected things never happen on Earth. Unexpected things like COVID-19, say. Well, of course, any reasonable person knows that unexpected things happen with great regularity. We don't know what they're going to be. Some of them are really, really unexpected, but that is the way of life. Here is a piece from the Daily Mail, Levi Parsons. Bullish premiers are threatening to thwart Australia's attempts to end relentless COVID lockdowns and border closures, backtracking on promises to follow the government's agreed path to a new COVID normal. Anastasia Palaszczuk. Are there any Australians who are still premiers in Australia now? Has hinted, have you ever seen this woman? And like that Armenian woman who's the governor of New South Wales? Yikes. Has hinted a plan to rebel against the federal government's calls agreed in National Cabinet to reopen state borders when vaccination targets are agreed. The Queensland Premier insisted reopening her state would leave every child under 12 vulnerable, despite the vast majority of kids, kids, not children, but kids, being barely affected by the virus. Her Western Australia counterpart, Mark McGowan, also warned that he would keep the border shut to New South Wales and Victoria, regardless of vaccination rates, accusing the government of trying to infect the public. When did the Scots become such weaklings? It came as Scott Morrison, another Scottish name, a Liberal government, issued an extraordinary ultimatum to crusading premiers on the path to COVID-0, telling them they must reopen borders by Christmas once vaccination rates hit 80%. Have you noticed that we're being told that Christmas might be canceled this year? It's September the 1st, and we're already being told that Christmas, in terms of just the orgy of consumption, well, the stuff's not going to be there. Well, why not? Businesses don't like to make money anymore. What do they know that we don't know? And this is a piece from the Australian Associated Press. Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has accused the Queensland Premier of denying reality after she declared border restrictions could remain until all children are vaccinated against COVID-19. Anastasia Palaszczuk has exposed a new division in the National Reopening Plan, which is linked to a vaccination coverage targets of 70 and 80%. The Queensland Labour leader is pledging to retain her hardline approach despite other states conceding eliminating coronavirus will be impossible. Ms. Plaschuk called for more research about vaccinating children under 12, a practice yet to be approved anywhere in the world. I don't think that goes far enough. I think that all children must be vaccinated, triple jabbed, in utero. Anything short of this is akin to murder. And this is from Kane and Citizen Free Press. Indefinite stay at quarantine camp. Yes. Concentration camps. Yeah, you remember what, I don't know. If you're as old as me, you remember the horror of talk of concentration camps, but concentration camps are a good thing. Why? Because they're putting bad people in them. Isn't that what, like the Nazis said about their political opponents? Or isn't that what the British said about the Boers? That these are bad people, so putting them in camps is a good thing? Yes, by the way, it was the British who invented the concentration camp in South Africa in the latter half of the 19th century. Police will remove you from your home if you test positive for COVID. Confused but happy to comply, he heads off for an indefinite stay at quarantine camp. Yes, it sounds very jolly. Does it not? Yes, and let's talk about this ugly Armenian woman who is the Premier of New South Wales. And this is very funny. I saw a full version of this video, which was about 5 minutes long. On the Daily Mail, you can see a version which is about a minute and a half long. I will personally stab you in the head. Zero freedom. Hilarious edits of Gladys, and I have trouble with this surname. Bear with me. Berejiklian's daily press conferences see the Premier tell New South Wales the state will never get out of lockdown. And they have the text here. The dystopian Premier promises to personally stab you in the head and rip your guts out. This is manipulated video, okay, if you hadn't guessed. As well as pledging to put 2 million cops on every street corner in the heavily edited video. If you leave home, you will be given a death sentence. Please, you know you'll be shot in the face and it will be painful. The video has foreboding music playing as Ms. Berejiklian reads out a message reminiscent of George Orwell's iconic novel, 1984. I'm tired of, let's see if I can do the accent. I'm tired of people saying that I don't know how to do my job properly. I hope everyone's like staying at home because we're going into lockdown forever. People from NSW will be going nowhere as we'll be having 2 million police officers standing at the corner of every street to monitor every single citizen. I hope this will be devastating. You are required to obey what we say when we say it, and if you don't, prepare to die. I don't care about your life or the life of those around you. I don't really give a shit. The government is now about to announce what we call the final solution. We are inspired by history and realize we can very easily permanently get rid of anyone thinking illegal thoughts. Follow the rules or you will never be seen again. This is very, very funny. But one wonders about, the value of satire. What's going on in Australia and New Zealand is genuinely unprecedented and horrific. And we can make fun of it all we like, but what difference does that make? Does that affect their opinions or their actions at all? No, apparently it doesn't. It doesn't at all. Let's go to Daily Skeptic, formerly Lockdown Skeptics. Vaccine passports will make hesitant people even more reluctant to get jabbed. New data comes as number 10, Downing Street, that is, vows to press on with its plan to make vaccination a condition of entry for nightclubs, reports The Guardian. Well, this is fairly obvious, isn't it? Hey, we have this great thing which is going to keep you safe from a deadly disease. Okay. We're going to bribe you to take it. What? You're going to bribe me to take it? The vaccine is free, right? Yes, it's free. Why are you bribing me to take it since it is efficacious and safe? Why are you bribing me? Apparently bribing isn't working, so we're going to have to threaten you. No, wait a minute. If this is efficacious and safe, why are you threatening me? Why are you telling me you're going to make a second-class citizen of me if I don't get double or triple jab? This suggests that you don't have full confidence in this. Megan Mertz. Yes, apparently Ofcom, which is the British regulator, media regulator, has cleared Good Morning Britain over Piers Morgan's comments about Meghan Markle. Free Speech Union's Tony Young, the idea that anyone who criticizes Megan Mertz must be racist and that any criticism of her racist is just ridiculous. Yes, because, Megan Mertz is a black woman. Well, she's a kind of sort of black woman that she is well below 50% black. But no, she's sainted and cannot be criticized because she's kind of sort of black. EFL launches education campaign to persuade footballers to get jabbed. Vaccine passports are unnecessary, unsupportable, and totalitarian. And this is from an opinion piece by Toby Young. Drivers face new taxes to help make up cost of move to electric cars. Victoria playgrounds were closed to stop parents meeting, not to stop COVID spreading among children. This is Victoria, Australia, not Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Much has been written on the damage of playground closures on young children during lockdowns. To add insult to injury, a Victoria health official has admitted that playgrounds in the state weren't closed because children were spreading COVID, for which there was and still is no evidence, but to stop parents from being able to meet. Justification for lockdown have implications that most people would not accept, say philosophers. In a paper due to appear in the Journal of Medicine and Philosophy, Samuel Director and Christopher Fryman examine the two main justifications that have been given for lockdown, and they find both of these justifications wanting. In particular, they argue that each one has implications that most people would not accept. The first major justification for lockdowns is that we have to minimize lives lost or perhaps life years lost. In other words, we should adopt whichever policy minimizes the total number of deaths. And since lockdown is the policy that achieves that, we should implement lockdowns. As an example of this justification, the authors quote the former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who said, quote, "We're not going to put a dollar figure on human life. The first order of business is to save lives, period, whatever it costs," unquote. Andrew Cuomo is such a macho man, but here you see him talking like a scared woman, and no one seemed to notice. Yet upon reflection, this justification makes very little sense. For example, it would imply that governments should drastically reduce speed limits to prevent all road deaths at the cost of time, convenience, and economic efficiency, or perhaps they'd have to ban cars altogether. As I previously noted, society has functions other than simply extending people's lives for as long as possible. If it did not, we'd spend a much higher fraction of GDP on healthcare, and we'd ban alcohol, smoking, and extreme sports. I understand that argument there, but I must say, Kingsley Amis wrote about this. Use of alcohol has been common to societies all around the world throughout the whole of recorded history. How do we know how it would have worked out if we banned alcohol? Maybe the use of alcohol is something that is a pressure valve that prevents us all from killing each other. And I mean that quite seriously. You know, Dr. Johnson, one of the certainly one of the greatest minds in British history, was once asked why he drank, and he replied, "The pain of being a man." And life is painful. No question about it. But let's get back here to bad people. This is from Susan Delacourt, who has been a prominent Canadian journalist, for as long as I've been alive. Well, close to it, anyway. She tweeted, "I spent 2 days on the road with Justin Trudeau and came away wondering why he'd want to win." Why he'd want to win? You're making this up, Susan Delacourt. You have no, you do know the gross humiliations that politicians are willing to go through in order to win. Look at Aaron O'Toole. It's National Bullying Day, which no one gives a toss about. And he dresses his son up, his 9 or 10-year-old son, in a pink T-shirt with some anti-bullying message, and then gets him to make some gay gesture for the camera. That's not something I would do, but Aaron O'Toole is willing to do it. So, Susan Delacourt writes yesterday at the Toronto Star, "As most Canadians are now keenly aware, viruses can mutate. So can elections, it seems." Where's she going with this? "A dominant strain has emerged in Canada's 44th general election, a variant on what was supposed to be a campaign to debate how to best emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. It comes in the form of angry protests, dogging Justin Trudeau's campaign, and like a virus, this has mutated into something unpredictable and chaotic." Oh, I see. We've gone Soviet here, have we? Dissidents are diseased and dangerous to everyone. So obviously we can't have that. Oh, I see. I mentioned the Sackler name. And a Jewish correspondent of me sent me a story from Haaretz. Sackler name is everywhere at Tel Aviv U, but not the opioid controversy plaguing the family. The university declines to comment as pressure grows, especially in the United States, on institutions to remove the name of the U.S. pharmaceutical family from their buildings. This is from Dina Kraft. On the campus of Tel Aviv University, medical students rush up the front stairs of the Sackler School of Medicine, an 11-story behemoth named after the family that donated the funds to build it. They push open doors into the lobby where a sign reads in capital letters, quote, "Dedicated to mankind for the health of all people," unquote. Those words have a different ring now that some members of the Sackler family face allegations that they helped trigger America's opioid crisis. Well, it's more than accusations. By 2017, the opioid epidemic had left some 400,000 people dead from overdoses, according to the CDC. But half of those deaths are estimated from prescription drugs, including OxyContin, the pain reliever made by the U.S. pharmaceutical giant owned by the Sacklers, Purdue Pharma. Tel Aviv University, the most prominent beneficiary of the billionaire Sackler family in Israel, declined to comment on Haaretz's question if it would, for example, remove the family name from its building, as activists have been pressuring institutions that receive Sackler money to do so. On Monday, Physicians for Human Rights in Israel said that it sent a letter to the dean of the Sackler School of Medicine requesting that the family's name be removed. In a statement, the organization said that it had done so because of the inherent acute clash between the sense of the medical calling that the faculty strives to imbue in its students, seeking to highlight the humanistic and ethical aspects of practicing medicine, and the conduct of members of the Sackler family as it emerges from publications and lawsuits filed against them in different American states. Ethics. I'm not really so convinced about ethics in medicine. It was reported last week that, strangely enough, at this hagiographic hoarding on Government Street in Vancouver, that the faces of Theresa Tam and the Chief Latrine Wara of British Columbia had been effaced, but that of Ignaz Semmelweis was still there. And I found this absolutely hilarious. As you may know, this is one of the most notorious cases in medical history. Semmelweis was a Jew who was a top doctor, physician in Vienna. And of course, at that time, in the 18th century, children were dropping like flies after they were born, and their mothers were dropping like flies. And Semmelweis had an idea. That was, get physicians to wash their hands before they deliver babies. And he instructed the physicians at this hospital in Vienna to do so. And the mortality rate of both children and mothers plunged. Well, where was Semmelweis's theory for this? It's all very well to say that, oh, well, wash your hands and deaths subside. But again, we need science, and you don't seem to have any science. And for two reasons. One, because of the lack of theory, and two, because Semmelweis was a Jew. He was pushed out, and they went back to not washing their hands, and of course, deaths went like this. And I always remember the story of Semmelweis when I think about doctors talking about science. Because doctors, like most everyone else on Earth, they go along to get along. It's true then, and it is true now. So, what I'm going to talk to now, let's talk to Matt Taibbi. He has a Substack, of course, like all important people. And this is from August 31st. NPR trashes free speech, a brief response. In an irony only public radio could miss. On the Media hosts an hour on the perils of free speech absolutism without interviewing a defender of free speech. You know, Vox Day argues that free speech was a mistake. And I have to wonder whether he's right about this. That it was the liberals, the people who become the progressives, who have become the radicals who argued for free speech. And when they got their free speech, they proceeded to shut the rest of us up. Free speech is really a declaration in a belief in a kind of indeterminacy of truth. And as I've said before, I think we've come to the end of the liberal age. It's over. But in any event, Taibbi writes, the guests for NPR's just released On the Media episode about the dangers of free speech include Andrew Marantz, author of an article called Free Speech is Killing Us, P.E. Moskowitz, author of The Case Against Free Speech, Susan Benesch, author of Dangerous Free Speech Project, and Berkeley professor John Powell, whose contribution was to rip John Stuart Mill's defense of free speech in On Liberty as wrong. It's about right for NPR, which for years now has regularly congratulated itself for being a beacon of diversity while expunging every conceivable alternative point of view. I always liked Brooke Gladstone, but this episode of On the Media was shockingly dishonest. The show was a compendium, a very neo-authoritarian argument for speech control one finds on Twitter, beginning with the blanket labeling of censorship critics as speech absolutists. What does that mean? Speech absolutists. My own view has been, you say what you like, I'll say what I like, as long as it's not criminal. I'm not going to burst into tears or want to murder someone because someone says something with which I disagree. For most of my life, I've been forced to put up with the elite saying things with which I disagree. But I learned to live with it. But now, even people saying, well, shouldn't we be allowed to disagree with the elite? No, you're a speech absolutists. You are akin to the Nazis. But how are we akin to the Nazis? Because They abolished free speech. Forget it. You're Nazis, okay? Don't you understand? I mean, how to argue with such people? There's no arguing with such people. I mean, we have got to the point now in the West where this is pretty much devolved to a question of will and force. John Stuart Mill, I can't say that I'm, a fan of his. John Stuart Mill was a extreme liberal to the point where he believed that social sanctions were as bad or perhaps worse than legal sanctions, which is a view which has been very much taken up by libertarians of the Reason magazine variety. Matt Taibbi, who I greatly admire, actually, says, we now know that people can be harmed by something other than physical violence. Mill, whose thoughts overlaid with harpsichord music so we could be reminded how antiquated they are, was wrong, and we have to recalibrate our understanding of speech rights accordingly. This was already an absurd and bizarre take, but what came next was worse. I was stunned by Morant's and Powell's take on Brandenburg versus Ohio, our current legal standard for speech, which prevents the government from intervening except in cases of incitement to imminent lawless action. Morant said neo-Nazi rhetoric about gassing Jews that might inflict psychological harm on a Holocaust survivor, but as long as there's no immediate incitement to physical violence, the government considers that protected. The village of Skokie tried to stop the Nazis from marching, but the ACLU took the case to the Supreme Court, and the court upheld the Nazis' right to march. Seriously? Skokie? First of all, I have to say I do not believe in the right of neo-Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois, because this is incitement, pure and simple. The reason that these neo-Nazis chose to march in Skokie was that they knew that this was a very heavily Jewish area, and they meant to terrify these mostly old Jews who lived in Skokie. That is not my understanding of speech. Taibbi says this is not remotely accurate as a description of what happened in Skokie. People like eventual ACLU chief Ira Glasser and lawyer David Goldenberg had spent much of the 60s fighting for the Jewish rights movement. The entire justification of these activists and lawyers, Jewish activists and lawyers, incidentally, who despised what neo-Nazi plaintiff Frank Collins stood for, was based not upon a vague notion of preventing psychological harm, but on a desire to protect minority rights. Again, it's like on the Glorious 12th, when the Orangemen marched through the Catholic areas of Belfast. The whole point is incitement. It's not about free speech, because no one is strangling the rights of Ulstermen to have their free speech in Northern Ireland. Let's go to the chat. What do we have here? Jake said, I hate Nazis right before he hits the gas, says William Hicks. Where has Vox moved his blog to? Blogspot? It's voxday.net. Contiki Roulette, I believe that's what it is. Ashy Main Bravo says, Hollywood Reporter headline, Joe Rogan says he tested positive for COVID-19, takes unproven horse dewormer. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I recall Steve McQueen. You've all heard of Steve McQueen, right? Steve McQueen got cancer, and Steve McQueen started taking some sort of medicine which was made from peach pits or something like that. And I don't know, he was desperate because he was dying. And why am I going to hold that against him? That he wants to, in the same way, if you read the Solzhenitsyn's Cancer Ward, that the protagonist in this takes some sort of, cancer of the birch tree, because he's dying and he doesn't want to die. Why would we hold this against anyone? Until COVID-19, people who were dying who decided to take unauthorized, or if you will, crazy medicines, Why is that any of our business? You know? Chad Chatson says, I used to mod for Vox. He doesn't believe in free speech. He prefers clean speech. Well, as I said a few minutes ago, liberalism doesn't seem to have worked. All it seems to have done is to empower our enemies to shut us up and to threaten us with ruin. Chad Chadson says Voxday.net won't come up on Google. Use an alternative search engine. Yes, as I've discovered, but I use DuckDuckGo. David Rice says Vox hates boomers and blames for everything a real high IQ take. No, it's really amusing, you know, reading Vox Day to me, that sometimes I get the impression that he wants me dead. I've never done anything to him, you know. And I reviewed Helen Andrews' books, Boomers, and I agree with it almost entirely, except for the fact that I was born in 1955, so I'm a late boomer. You know, all the stupid things that boomer believes, we didn't come up with these ideas. It was the silent generation or the greatest generation who gave us these stupid ideas. For instance, everyone is the same. Oh, men and women are the same. Oh, there's no substantial differences between ethnic groups or people in different parts of the world. Or I could go on and on. We didn't come up with those ideas. The silent generation and the greatest generation did. So, do I want to talk about Afghanistan? Ann Coulter praises Biden on Afghanistan. Thank you for keeping promise Trump made, but then abandoned. This is Gustav Killander at the London Independent. Conservative commentator Ann Coulter praised President Joe Biden for having the balls to pull out of Afghanistan and called former President Donald Trump's statements on the issues wuss and BS. Trump repeatedly demanded that we bring our soldiers home, but only President Biden had the balls to do it. Here are a few of Trump's wuss BS. I mean, masterful tweets. Coulter tweeted on Tuesday and included a screenshot of some of Trump's Afghanistan statements supporting U.S. troop withdrawal. Well, I've said it before, and I've said it again. Ann Coulter, disappointed suitor. She wrote a book that was influential to Donald Trump when he was running for president. And then when he became president, she seemed to think that she would be his guru, his intellectual guru, and that whatever she said, he would do. Notwithstanding the fact that Coulter has no experience in government whatsoever. And I don't know, maybe she could have talked to someone like Pat Buchanan, who I know she likes, but how a president wanting something and then getting it done through the bureaucracy is something else again. But I look at Ann Coulter and I see a kind of psychosexual attachment to Trump, that she seems romantically disappointed in him. And I don't know, this is a woman in her 50s who's never been married and has never had any children. And yes, I think that's important. Actually, I think that it is. I mean, come on. I've never had any experience in government myself, but I know that politicians, demanding something and then it getting done, you don't know how this works. You've never seen "Yes, Mr. Minister" say. And of course, under the parliamentary system, there's more power there than under the presidential system. There's less of a deep state in Britain than there is in America. Let's see. Jules Roy says, I see Teddy Spaghetti is back on Gab after attacking it and anyone who disagreed with him. He's really rather ferocious about that, isn't he? How old is Vox Day, by the way? I'm kind of curious about that. I would guess that he's in his 40s. Would that be right? Just let me see if I can. Well, I can. Oh, he's born in 1968. Okay, so he's 53 years old. He's not in his 40s. He's in his 50s. Generally, by the time that a man reaches his 50s, he truly appreciates the limits of human action. Kontiki Relax says, High Priestess Wannabe. David Wright says, kind of like Milo, Greek name. Metal Mike says, she's besties with Bill Maher. That should give us pause. David Wright says something which I'm not going to repeat. But no, I mean, I just, again, there's obviously something personal here. Personal and, you know, as I say, disappointed suitor. This is from Morgan Phillips at the Daily Mail. Nothing to see here. Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, refuses to discuss Joe's leaked call with ex-Afghanistan president that reveals Biden knew Afghan army was collapsing because it was private. So you ever wonder why Afghanistan president managed to, you know, disappear with, I don't know, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in cash? Well, there was obviously a deal made with Joe Biden, wasn't there? That Ghani, who I suppose is, you know, Afghan, maybe even a little closer to the scene, knew that the situation was about to fall apart. But no, don't say anything about that, says Joe Biden, because that will make me look bad. And, okay, let's talk about the dogs of Afghanistan. I'm looking forward to a series of heroic films about this. This is from Tori Richards at Washington Examiner, a Tennessee woman who owns an animal rescue center in Kabul. What happens in life that you're a Tennessee woman who ends up owning an animal rescue center in Kabul? How does that happen? Is that something you planned for when you were young? Is that something you told your parents and your teachers that you were looking forward? That was your aspiration as an adult, to own an animal rescue center in Kabul? In any event, this Tennessee woman was not allowed passage home by the Department of Defense because she carried a disabled puppy in her arms, one of 130 animals she was ordered to leave behind in the final days of airlifts. Charlotte Maxwell Jones refused to board the plane without her puppy on Monday, so the military ordered her to leave and turn loose 130 crated dogs that belonged mostly to Americans and Afghans who evacuated, according to social media postings. This occurred even though Maxwell Jones secured flights from nonprofit organizations that had permission to land in a neutral country. She left the airport after being stuck there for 6 days and returned home to an uncertain fate. The Taliban visited Maxwell Jones at home last week and ordered her to leave with her employees, she said in a tearful video posted on Twitter. She raised $704,000 on a GoFundMe page for an animal evacuation and desperately sought a landing permit. 5 minutes ago, a fairly large group of Taliban left my lawn. One of them had a grenade launcher. They told me I should leave immediately and tried to put guards inside my house. We settled on outside my house, Maxwell Jones said. They have said that they will give us safe passage to the airport for as large a group that we have. They told me to leave first. It's very obvious what will happen. And this is a story from military.com. The U.S. military Tuesday denied reports in the wake of its departure from Afghanistan that it had left working dogs behind at the airport in Kabul or that it had abandoned dogs in cages. Presidential Press Secretary John Kirby said in a tweet, the U.S. troops did not leave dogs in cages at Hamid Karzai International Airport. Why do we keep saying this? Hamid Karzai International Airport. Oh, yes, the great hero of Afghanistan, America's puppet there. Why can't we just call it Kabul Airport? Are there any, are there municipal airports there in Kabul? When its last flights took off Monday afternoon. Photos circulated on social media showed 150 dogs in cages lined up at the airport are of animals belonging to a group called Kabul Small Animal Rescue, the Pentagon said. They were not military working dogs or under the care of U.S. troops. As of Tuesday, the dogs pictured were still in Afghanistan. And, okay, so the story that the Pentagon is saying is that the Afghans are going to take care of this, the dog problem, the dogs in cages, because they love dogs. I'm not an expert on Islam, but everything I've heard about Islam and dogs informs me that Muslims hate dogs. I mean, I'm not known as a dog lover, but they really hate dogs because they think that they're unclean in a religious sense. But no, the Pentagon says that no military dogs were left behind. So, if the Pentagon says it, it must be true, right? So what is the U.S. military up to? People have been, Donald Trump got into a lot of trouble when he supposedly railed at American generals saying, why can't you win a war? Was the last time you won a war? Well, maybe this might have something to do with American military culture. This is from army.mil, which is the official website of the U.S. Army. This is from Private Devin Klecken. 5 Corps hosts Don't Date a Jerk workshop. Is that a problem that comes up in war often? But in any event, this story is datelined Fort Knox, Kentucky. 5 Corps soldiers took the opportunity to enrich their personal lives during the chaplain-led Single Soldiers Strong Bonds Retreat in Mason, Ohio, August 20th to 23rd. Chaplains, eh? So they're all about, personal relationships and not dating jerks and not anything to do with God anymore. The retreat themed How to Avoid Falling in a Jerk taught soldiers relationship enhancement with a focus on the importance of picking a future partner that leads to healthy, sustainable relationship. The classes were provided in a fun, safe, and secure environment away from the post in order to give the soldiers a break from military lifestyle stressors. Stressors, like being in the military, for instance. It's really important now to schedule and provide classes like these for soldiers, said 5 Corps chaplain Captain Brad Vysomirski, a native of Cleveland. The Army wants to make sure we're putting training and value back in developing healthy relationships. The retreat also provides the soldiers with time to decompress and nurture friendships. Again, this is the official website of the U.S. Army. Corporal Ashanti Bracey from Virginia Beach, Virginia, a religious affairs specialist. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to swear here. Corporal Ashanti Bracey from Virginia Beach, Virginia, a religious affairs specialist. What the fuck does that mean? Unit Ministry Team, Headquarters and Headquarters Battalion, 5 Corps, and the main facilitator, as opposed to say organizer of the event, ensured that the event was coordinated in a way that balanced the class lessons with free time for soldiers. Event planning started in late June, Bracey said. We work hard to incorporate the main activity with plans to provide lodging, food, and most importantly, making sure the soldiers are comfortable. So you invite a bunch of soldiers to an official U.S. military event, and apparently providing lodging, food are difficult, considering the enormous budget of the U.S. Army and its installations worldwide. Soldiers signed up to attend the class for many reasons. Some wanted to learn new life skills that can benefit their future relationships. Others wanted to try a strong bonds retreat for the first time, and some simply wanted to go somewhere new. Yes. Yes, in the U.S. Army, you're always in the same place. You're in Fort Bragg forever. You never leave. It's so boring. There's no variety in being in the U.S. Army. Soldiers, yeah, okay. Regardless of the reason, the soldiers that attended the events found it beneficial. I learned that making an actual plan for creating close connections with another individual tends to develop a longer lasting bond, says specialist Nathaniel Mesa, a native of Franklin Park, Illinois. This sounds very bureaucratic approach to human relations, but never mind that. Taking a step back and understanding your values can benefit you morally, mentally, and emotionally. Chaplain Wysomirski hopes to see more 5-Corps soldiers attend more free, fun, and educational training opportunities in the future. I hope that training will help soldiers make healthier choices for who and how they date, said Wysomirski. Sometimes soldiers don't make the right decisions because they don't have the right tools. Our goal is to teach them how to have a lasting relationship and to give them the tools to aid their personal endeavors. 5-Corps will continue to provide soldiers with retreats to better educate them on topics that are essential for personal and relationship development as part of the Army's People First initiative. Strong Bonds is a unit-based, chaplain-led program which assists commanders in building individual resiliency by strengthening the Army family. The core mission of the Strong Bonds program is to increase individual soldier and family member readiness through relationship education and skills training. Readiness for what? Readiness for duty as a soldier? Apparently not. Priorities. Rollo Klevich, which is a new name to me, says apparently the military-type dogs left behind were defense security contractor dogs. Okay. Chogakin 666 says Salukis are bred and courses by Arabs. There are a few Arabic and Levantine breeds. Arabs hunt. Don Willis says Kabul, site of the 2021 Korean barbecue cook-offs. Afghan hounds are beautiful, says Chogokin 666. They have very squashed skulls. They're not intelligent dogs at all, are they? I could be wrong about this. I mean, skull size is important to dog intelligence. And these dogs have very squashed skulls, as do collies. Okay. And what are we going to talk about now? Let's go back to Tainter and the collapse of complex societies, levels of complex societies. Anthropologists who have studied the evolution of human organization have often found it convenient to develop typologies of simpler societies. The distinction between state and non-state is one example of such a classification, and is probably the one with which most anthropologists would feel comfortable. Some scholars, to be discussed below, have further divided states into subcategories of this class, e.g., and I'm not going to, there's a bunch of scholars listed. I shouldn't have mentioned that. While others have subdivided non-state societies into levels of complexity. A consideration of these evolutionary typologies is pertinent to understanding collapse, even to defining what the process is. Some anthropologists, for example, have suggested that drops in complexity within a level, such as the state level, are not instances of collapse, merely waxings and wanings of scale. The details of such typologies, there are many of them, incompatible to varying degrees, are not pertinent to the present work, but the philosophy and assumptions underlying them are. One of the basic assumptions of the typological approach is that as societies increase in complexity, they do so by leaps from one structurally stable level to another. Thus, what are called chiefdoms are thought to have risen out of tribes, which in turn developed from bands. In another formulation, egalitarian societies are succeeded by ones that are ranked, then ones that are stratified, and finally, in a few instances, by the state. The alternative view, which to some degree vitiates a typological approach, is that as societies increase in complexity, they do so on a continuous scale, so that discrete, stable levels will be difficult to define and indeed may not exist. Any good classifier knows that in the process of classifications, information about variety is lost while information about similarities is gained. The utility of a classification must be judged, at least partially, by whether the quantity and quality of information gained outweighs that lost, and this depends largely on the purposes and needs of the analyst. In some respects, evolutionary typologies of human societies are useful in that they facilitate initial communication and comparison. When an anthropologist says that he or she is working on a society of type X, chiefdoms say, most colleagues readily know, at least generally, what the characteristics of that society are likely to be. Yet in this example, some of the weaknesses of the typological approach become apparent. The degree of variation among societies called chiefdoms, e.g. Northwest Coast, Hawaii, is such that many feel uncomfortable with the concept. For many purposes, it may obscure more than it reveals. Solutions that focus on further subdividing the chiefdom category bring only the potential for endless debate and unprofitable concentration on labels rather than on processes of stability and change. The typological distinction of most interest here is that which exists between states and all other kinds of societies. This, as noted, is a classificatoria distinction that most anthropologists seem to accept. And it is off, hang on just a second. I'm reading this off of PDF, and it is, this is difficult to move from page to page. I am sorry about this. With the emergence of states, human organization began an entirely different career. The features that set states apart, abstracting from the previous discussion, are territorial organization, differentiation by class and occupation rather than by kinship, monopoly of force, authority to mobilize resources and personnel, and legal jurisdiction. Under close examination, it does not appear that there are always the discontinuity claimed between state and non-state societies for many of these characteristics. Territoriality and the capacity to mobilize labor and other resources occur in varying degrees among non-state societies, depending on such things as population density, pressures from competing neighbors, degree of stratification, and requirements for centralized storage, redistribution, and public works. The presence of formal law in primitive societies, furthermore, has been a matter of anthropological debate for some time. Cañero notes that not all so-called states have had a true monopoly of force, e.g. Anglo-Saxon England. Various authors, as noted, have felt the need to create classifications of early states. Webb, for example, uses the term conditional state to describe complex, fairly durable chiefdoms that are like states but never achieve a true monopoly of force. Conditional estates appear superficially to be similar to states but never fully complete the transformation. It must be observed that formulations like this, which come from a strong proponent of the states are different school, create serious doubts about the postulated distinctiveness of states. Clayson and Skalnick distinguish various types of early states they are, and I will get into those distinctions tomorrow on the show. So in culture news, this is from Bloomberg. And yes, Bloomberg again is going to do that thing to me where I save it, but it's not going to let me open it directly from the link for reasons which I'm sure make a lot of sense to Bloomberg, but don't make any sense to me because everyone else lets you do this. But in any event, I think I remember the gist of the story, which is that Netflix shares gained significantly because it was announced that reruns of Seinfeld would begin in, October, I believe it was. Now, Seinfeld is a show that began in 1989 and ended in 1988, which was 23 years ago. So what does this tell us about our culture? That we don't like new things? Well, there seem to be innumerable new things, especially, on Netflix and Amazon Prime and all the other streaming services. But apparently people like things of which they know. Now, I suppose Seinfeld is rather like The Office, that people who like the shows, They have seen all the episodes many, many times, but they prefer to watch them again and again. Again, this correspondent that I mentioned earlier, he suggested to me that the random nature of the appearance of, say, a show like Seinfeld, that this was important because you don't know what you're going to get. But when it was announced, what was this, a year ago or some such, that Netflix was losing The Office and people were wailing, "Oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened." And I thought, do you know that you can buy whole of The Office, all of the seasons, and how many were there? 8, 9, something like that, for something like $50 or $60? No, nope, not interested in that. If you go on Amazon.com, it's a little different. Canada, about 10%, 15% more expensive. You can buy all of the seasons of Seinfeld, 9 of them, and this is in DVD form. It is 33 discs. You can buy this for $63.20. So depending on how much you're paying in tax, that's about $2 a DVD. But no, apparently picking the box off the shelf and opening it up, selecting a disc, turning on your DVD player, putting the disc in, waiting for the Interpol information and the national security information, because of course, national security of the United States is dependent upon DVDs not being pirated, but you'll get there. And the thing about owning the complete series of Seinfeld or The Office or whatever is that you own it forever or until the discs stop working. And when it's decided that, I don't know, like the Puerto Rican Day episode of Seinfeld is so horrible that it cannot be shown on any streaming services, no, but you'll have it there on your disc and you can watch it whenever you like. But, as I joked earlier in the day, Granddad, how does a DVD player work? It just seems so incredibly complicated. Just incredibly, come on. Like, we take out a physical object and we put it in a machine which plays physical objects. I just can't wrap my head around that. Something I find difficult for me to wrap my head around, as the kids say, or used to say, are modern movies. I was introduced to this fellow. He's from Montreal, apparently. His name is Ryan George. You can find him at the Ryan George on Twitter. And he is on a site called Screen Rant, and he does this bit called Pitch Meetings. And the joke is that there's two of him. There is the screenwriter, who's wearing glasses, kind of old-fashioned kind of glasses, who's speaking to the producer. And he's explaining just how stupid all these movies are. Now, there's a whole bunch of catchphrases associated with this, such as super easy, barely an inconvenience, or unclear, or I don't know, or wow, or XXX is tight, And I've watched about 100 of these. There's 252 videos of this. I had no idea, I knew about franchises and I knew about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I had no idea how many of these movies were, for the reason that, I don't know. I watch Red Letter Media and I watch pretty much all their videos. So I'm introduced to some of these MCU movies or some of these other franchise movies. But again, I had no idea how many of them there are. And I have to say, I find this all very funny, very, very funny. He's kept this fresh. He kept it, tight for over 200 episodes. But I find this all very depressing because these movies are all so stupid. All so stupid. Imagine that you had the power to fly, or imagine that you had the power to be invisible. That would be pretty transformative, right? No. We need to have powers. Superheroes need to have powers, I don't know, like Brie Larson, that are pretty much unlimited. Well, where's the conflict there? If a person has powers which are pretty much unlimited, then how could anyone constitute any kind of obstacle? Because that's the nature of human conflict. However you want to look at it, is obstacles to what you want. And if you are superhuman to the point of that no one can resist you, where is the juice to be extracted from this? No, there's no juice to be extracted from it, except that you are a kick-ass feminist babe. And anyone who, could possibly say your story is really boring, well, you must be a, misogynist, right? So you see how meta this has become. You're not even selling the movie anymore. You are selling the anticipated reaction to the movie. And I don't know. I'm reading Bad Billy Pratt's Welcome to Hell, and I'm thinking, what's the connection between this book, say, and these movies? That they have no connection with reality anymore? None whatsoever? Maybe that has something to do with it. I want what I want because I want it, and I want it now. Previous generations understood that, a couple of things. One, you weren't going to get everything that you wanted. And two, perhaps getting everything you wanted at that particular time was not such a good thing. But watching these movies, these billion-dollar grossing movies, I'm thinking that apparently art has become exhausted because it has nothing to teach us anymore. The great advantage of art over life is that the artist can, if he is a great artist, assume a omniscient or a godlike view of the world. He can explain things that can't be explained by reference to real events. But we're not interested in anything that's close to real anymore. And there's no end to these things, although perhaps the COVID-19, the collapse of the movie theater, and the shift to Disney Plus and the like will make a difference here. Because, it's going to be rather difficult, in the pitch meeting. We have to spend $500 million on this film. $500 million? Well, how much do you think you're going to get of that back playing on a streaming service? Let's go back to the chat. Dionysus says conservatives tend to be older. Well, the older conservatives tend to be older, but, Chad Chadson, our Valiant Moderator, says, I would love it if KMG made an Entropy account and streamed movies for all of us to see. I'm not familiar with Entropy accounts, but I will look into it. I don't have to do that thing where it's the first viewing where, oh, damn. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to slap my hands on my face and say, oh, damn, oh, shit, or any of that stuff, But no, I mean, obviously, I'm very much divorced from the average moviegoer KMG reaction videos, because this stuff that people watch, I don't want to see it. When Tim Burton's Batman came out, I heard good things, and the production design is just stupendous. It's not CGI, by the way, and Jack Palance is great in it, and Jack Nicholson is stupendous. You know, it actually had an amusing, interesting way of looking at a story that we all know. But now there is a movie coming out. Is it coming out this year or next year? Which is called The Batman. Oh, it's The Batman. It's not Batman, because we've all seen that. And this movie is directed by Matt Reeves. And he's 60, he's born in 1966. Okay, so he's no spring chicken. And Matt Reeves has made two of my favorite movies of this millennium, Cloverdale, and the remake of that Swedish vampire movie, Let Him In. Let Me In, his version was called. And I thought that both of these movies were absolutely tremendous. And then he made Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and then War for the Planet of the Apes. And I thought, this guy has so much talent, and we're not going to let you make original films anymore. Even, a remake of a Swedish film. And of course, his version is very different from the original. But no, we can't have talented people working on interesting projects anymore. Let's just get him to make another Batman movie. Oh, emo Batman? It's Robert Pattinson, isn't it? Let's see. Metal Mike says, like when they had that guy in PBS in the 80s introducing films. Star Rover says, China's movie industry has surpassed Hollywood. Chinese are rejecting woke Hollywood movies. Don't like stars of color. No, they don't like that. And alternate sexualities. That's going to be a problem, isn't it? With the, we're just going to stick some black guy, and he's the smartest guy in the world, and he's a Mary Sue, and also alternate sexualities. Like Robin is bisexual now. Yeah, bisexual, as if that actually exists. Let's talk about something more pleasing to end the show. Let's talk about music, and let's talk about the Bach family, which is one of the most remarkable families in history, which dominated musical life in Lower Germany for 200 years. But specifically, we have Johann Sebastian Bach, who was born in 1685 and died in 1750, who is, one could say, the foundation of modern music, with his well-tempered scale. That Bach he didn't invent forms in the way of, say, Haydn with the string quartet and the symphony. They didn't really invent it. Haydn didn't really invent it, but one could say that he perfected it. But I wanted to talk about the Bach family because, there was this ridiculous claim made that to refer to a composer with his last name was somehow white supremacist. Oh, to refer to Madonna. When someone say Madonna, do they mean the Virgin Mary? When you hear the word Madonna, do you think the Virgin Mary? No, you think of this woman from Detroit. That's who you think of. It's just a shorthand. But, we hear of Bach, but there's some validity to this criticism because Johann Sebastian Bach is arguably the greatest composer ever. But he had sons. And several of his sons were great composers as well. And I suppose we need to start with Bach's wives. Bach was married twice. His first wife was called Maria Barbara, and she was born in 1684, and she died in 1720. And they had 7 children. Wilhelm Friedemann Bach was born in 1710 and died in 1784. Is considered by some to have been the greatest of his children, but he seems to have been somewhat of a feckless character. He created many works, many of which you can find recorded. It's an interesting thing about the Bach family that there were Bach and his children. And okay, so Bach was great and his children, well, they were less great versions of Bach. Well, that's not true. And 2 things happened in the 20th century that changed our recognition of them. The first is that classical music that people actually like had died by about 1950. And what that resulted in was, well, okay, so what else do we have that's old that hasn't really been recorded? And one result of that was the Baroque movement became huge. Vivaldi, a recording of, I believe, the Academy of St. Martin's in the Fields, was the first classical music record to sell 1 million copies. But Vivaldi, who is considered an afterthought, just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Handel, another example. If you listen to classical music stations now, particularly the commercial ones, if you have access to them, they love Baroque music. It's the perfect music for commuters driving to work or driving back from work because it's not going to offend them. That's the way they look at it. They consider it to be really rather emotionally thin music, which I don't believe is true. Another one of Maria Bach's children was Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, who was born in 1714 and died in 1788. He was taught by his father. His father was pretty much his only teacher. And Cpe Bach was one of the strangest musicians ever. I mean, in terms of his music, the way that is laid out, the bizarre changes in it. Cpe Bach can be seen to be a great precursor of what was known as the classical style, as to distinguish it from the late Baroque style of Johann Sebastian Bach. Years before Bach, as I say, Bach, J.S. Bach died in 1750. For some time before his death, his music was seen to be, he'd outlived his time. That J.S. Bach's music was too technical. That he was too concerned with possibilities of fugue and like. And if you look at, say, Die Kunst der Fuge, The Art of the Fugue, and other late works of Bach, you see that he had moved beyond problems of interpretation and performance. He was writing pure music. He was writing for the ages. But of course, tastes in music changed, as they always change. And how would you say, not exactly a lighter, but a more supple form of music became popular, was seen to be needed. And Cpe Bach filled that position. Again, on the one hand, it's bad that very little contemporary music has been, classical music has been written since 1950 that anybody likes. I mean, really likes, as opposed to pretending to like. But again, the advantage of it is that someone like Cpe Bach, that we grew to know his music. And we had not known it before. Because, why would we need this Bach when we had the great Bach? But Cpe Bach he wrote pretty much everything. His father had written pretty much everything except, well, operas. And what we get from Cpe Bach, we get symphonies, concertos, chamber music, sonatas, his keyboard sonatas in particular, choral works. And Cpe Bach is such a strange performer because he is so severe on the one hand, but again, as I mentioned before, he is so strange or even bizarre in his modulations. They are really quite delightful. And, we hear them after hundreds of years and we wonder, how did someone come up with something like that in the 18th century? Bach's second wife was called Anna Magdalena Bach. She was a singer, and she bore 13 children to her husband. And the most famous of which is Johann Bach, who was known variously as the Italian Bach, the London Bach, or simply John Bach. He was born in 1735. He died in 1782. He was educated largely by his elder half-brother, Cpe Bach. He trained in, well, first by the family, but then he trained in Italy, where he spent quite a number of years, over a decade. He became a convert to Catholicism. And then he ended up in London. And J.C. Bach was, at one point, fabulously popular in London, in England. And it was a curious thing about English music for hundreds of years that there was little or no homegrown English music of any distinction. So a series of foreigners would show up in England and they would be acclaimed, and then something new would come along and they would be forgotten. J.C. Bach was forgotten, well, for almost 200 years. But of course, he has this great connection to Mozart. That Mozart came to London when he was 8 years old. And when Mozart found out about the death of Johann Bach, he was very, very sad because he remembered how much he owed to J.C. Bach, that Mozart would literally sit on J.C. Bach's lap, and they would improvise at the piano. And a number of Mozart's early works, his earliest works, his childish works, were in fact co-written with J.C. Bach. Now, when comparing the two greatest Bach sons, J.C. and Cpe, there are many people who dismiss Johann Bach as a minor composer, a flighty composer, or whatever. No, well, it's not true, actually. He didn't certainly have the depths of his half-brother, Cpe, but his work is absolutely solid. There's no question about that. That his works, I mean, you really have to get to, when you're looking at Mozart, you really have to get to, say, about the 25th Symphony before you're dealing with really deep, mature works. I mean, Mozart based on that execrable film that was made about him, Amadeus. Oh, yeah, the greatest child prodigy. He was not the greatest child prodigy, not even close. If you're looking at depths of expression from a child composer, both Rossini and Mendelssohn were superior to him. In terms of music, Naxos has made available a series of quite cheap, I mean not expensive recordings, say from Camerata Budapest, of symphonias by Cpe Bach, and they are really quite good. But above all, I would recommend a series of, it was in the 1960s and 1970s that you had a revolution before the so-called, the stupidly named historic performance, or vegetarians, as Pinchas Zuckerman called them. You see Neville Marriner and Raymond Lepard and David Zinman and the like, who made tremendous strides in this. And you can get from Newton, which is a reprinting of a Phillips recording from the 1970s. And you can get it at Amazon for just $10, 15 symphonies of Cpe Bach, played by the Netherlands Chamber Orchestra and recorded by David Zinman. And this is absolutely tremendous stuff. Absolutely tremendous. The stuff that Neville Marriner made, it's a little more, you'd have to buy this offhand. But generally, when you're looking at the Naxos recordings, which are made with so-called non-authentic orchestras of 18th century music, this is normally very, very good indeed. Now, if you are looking to investigate music of Cpe Bach, again, there are many, many collections. I hate the vegetarians. The whole idea of historic performance is totally bogus. Others may disagree, which is going, if you don't want the historic performance, you're going to run into some problems because they took this stuff over in the 1980s. I can recommend some records of Cpe Bach that I own. Keyboard sonatas played by Francois Chaplin on Naxos. And, oh yes, sonatas and rondos played by Mikhail Pletnev, which is on Deutsche Grammophon. Ton Kopman, I cannot recommend him. I simply can't. But as I say, if you stick with the Naxos stuff, generally, again, we have, let's see, Cpe Bach, Hamburg Symphonias, Capella Istropolitanica, conducted by Christian Benda, Hamburg Symphonias. These are really good, really, really good. And if you can find stuff by Neville Marriner or David Zinman or Raymond Lepard, those are all gold standards, absolute gold standards. Another record I can recommend, Cello Concertos by Bach, Tim Hugh on the cello, Burnworth Sinfonia. That is really, really good stuff. And let's see if I can find any other works here. Hansler Classics has made a complete Cpe Bach. This is kind of insane, really. The idea, oh, what? You're going to record all of Cpe Bach's recording? Like, who would be interested in that? But as I said earlier, there is an enormous amount of interest in composers that people were not all that interested in, because we've run out of things to be interested in. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. I mean, the quest for novelty is unending. I can recommend complete works for piano solo, played by Markovina. What is her first name here? I believe she's a woman. Maria Markovina, which is on Hansler, which is really good. And you think, okay, how interesting could Cpe Bach be? Well, very interesting indeed. Okay, this is 24 CDs of music, and it is absolutely great stuff. Because, well, I'll just conclude by saying this, that Cpe Bach and J.C. Bach are tremendously underrated composers to this day. And particularly with regard to Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, the wealth of invention that you find in his works is certainly worthy of both Haydn and Mozart. Let's have a final look at the chat. Goldberg variations are good when you are down, specifically Glenn Gould, says Dionysius. Well, as you've heard me say, I'm not fond of Glenn Gould. I very much like Charles Rosen or Wilhelm Kempff in the Goldberg variations. Visionary Companion says the greatest hits of 1720 was one of my introductions to classical music, along with Alfred Brendel's recordings and Julian Bream. Alfred Brendel, well, of course, I love Alfred Brendel. Brendel's, well, we know, the big works, but Brendel has, 5 CDs of Haydn piano, which is tremendously underrated. Ashiman Bravo says the spokesman for the Taliban said there was no evidence Osama bin Laden was behind the 9/11 attacks. Yes, that's a very interesting aspect of history. That after 9/11, the Americans blamed Afghanistan, specifically that the Taliban was giving cover to Osama bin Laden. And the Taliban said, show us the evidence that Osama bin Laden is responsible and we will take care of him. Well, I mean, you can't say fairer than that, can you? I mean, I don't like the Taliban, obviously, but we've seen over the last year, when Trump made an agreement with them, that they tend to, if they give their word, they keep their word. Oh, and by the way, remember the Taliban was excoriated for pulling down monuments? I don't want to hear another word about that. After the last 2 years, when monuments, hundreds of them or thousands of them, all over Canada, the United States, have been pulled down, and we're all supposed to cheer. Are any sheet music stores left in Vancouver, KMG? I wouldn't know about that. I haven't lived in Vancouver 20 years. I would suspect not. There was a famous classical music CD store, and they sold vinyl as well. They had that upstairs called Sikora's on West Hastings, I think at Richards in Vancouver. And last time I was in Vancouver about a year ago, it's not there anymore. Let's put it that way. And that whole block has just become kind of scary, which is kind of strange because it is close to the heart of downtown. Why does Sam Harris tweet that he regrets being pro-Biden? Because of the departure? I don't know. I can't say. Neil Terry says, I see a Mad Magazine style parody with a goofy looking guy with cross ties, 18th century clothing, and a powdered wig trying to play a bassoon while wearing a surgical mask. Cpe Bach. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. And I know I don't want to talk about the Family Guy, and I don't even like to think about the Family Guy, let alone watching Family Guy. Even thinking about Family Guy, I can hear my IQ dropping. I can hear it. I can hear it. KMG, Quachalango says, have you ever had any string instrument playing girlfriends? No, I haven't, sadly. Sadly. I would, it's like having a girlfriend with a posh English accent playing a serious instrument, even fairly well, this is raising their value to me like 30 or 40%. And okay, so final comments here, if we have any. Close that there. Can we mention the 800-pound gorilla heroin? I don't know what that's a reference to. Taliban offered to yield after the invasion of 2001 if they could be part of the new government, but they were rebuffed, says Steve. Okay, that's saw Julian Bream once, says Quachulango. Well, you're lucky. You're lucky. I can't recall ever seeing any classical guitarists. I've seen a bunch of famous musicians in concert. I think that the greatest example that I ever saw of this, not that I actually saw him, because this was Karl Richter, and it was an organ recital at the Anglican Cathedral in Vancouver, which is downtown. Up in the organ loft, you can't see him play. You can't see him play at all. You can't see anything. And after, it was an all Bach recital, and after each number, he came out and he gave a shy little smile and a shy little bow. And if you've seen Richter, in his album covers or in the DVDs, which are made of he looks so German and forbidding. And just his shyness in this recital is quite possibly the most charming thing that I have ever seen. I encountered a music student who thought Brendel's playing was mechanical. No, Glenn Gould's playing was mechanical. This is from, who said this? No, I don't find his playing mechanical at all. Well, Brendel is absolutely tremendous, particularly in the range of his repertoire. He was a apostle of the modernists, Brendel, like Berg and such like. Anyway, that's it for tonight. That was Emmett Kelly's Earth, who asked me the question about Alfred Brendel. So that's it for tonight. Let's see. Tomorrow is Theater Thursday. And what do we have coming up on that? We have, the Milius documentary about Figaro and Knudsen. Tremendous, tremendous stuff. And on Friday, I'm going to be talking about Bad Billy Pratt's Welcome to Hell. So that's it for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which frankly would be really, really appreciated considering the situation I find myself in today, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you are Canadian, you can contribute to the live stream via Interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And with that, I leave you with the benediction in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you managed, my dear viewers and listeners, managed to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.